Assalamu alaikum, everyone. You are listening to episode 61 of the Muhammad Ghailan podcast with yours truly as the host. I know it has been a few weeks. I have to apologize. You guys got to realize, I feel bad already that I keep intending and I promise that I'm going to be more regular with the podcast, but you got to realize I'm running this solo. There is really nobody, other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving me blessing in my time. I don't have anybody to rely on this stuff. Recording the podcast and processing it, that's me. And editing, that's me. Recording for Andalus Book Club webinars and the video content that I put up there, that's also me. I'm the one who's doing all of that stuff. Now that I mentioned Andalus Book Club, maybe I just give you a plug. So this morning we just finished the webinar for The Malaise of Modernity by Charles Taylor. That video is going to have to go up by tomorrow. So again, that's me. If you're not a member, go and join. And those book club papers that I'm writing and I'm working on, readings that I have to get done. And that's all outside of medical school, right? Aside from me needing to have a life as well. I still maintain my gym schedule. I work out and I do all these things. I still have to, I have family here in Brisbane now. I go visit my cousin and stuff. So that's all outside of medical school. Now you got to add medical school commitments. And now that we're entering into the second half of second year, so this is the capstone semester. We are now bringing in the last 18 months of study all together so that we can prepare for our transition into the hospital setting full-time starting next year. So it's quite busy. We just had exams this past weekend, the observed simulated clinical exams. So it's quite something. So I ask for your prayers that Allah facilitate my efforts and grant me blessing in my time because I really need it. The weeks where I just run out of time, unfortunately, the podcast is literally the last thing that I do in the week because I have to fulfill all of my other commitments. And the past few weeks is just ran out of time. Just didn't have it. Not to mention that I also I've been working. It's not that I haven't been preparing some material for the podcast and have some ideas and episodes coming up that, they're going to be interesting to say the least. So the material is there. It's just I need to sit down and record it and then process it. And all that takes some time. So I hope you guys will just be patient with me as I go through all of that. Now, the subject matter for this week, as you can tell from the title, Tariqa or cult, when spirituality is pathology, this arose out of a couple of things. The first one was a few weeks ago, I watched a documentary that just came out on Netflix, Wild Wild West. I highly recommend you guys watch that documentary. It's a 6-part documentary about, I don't know if you heard of Osho. Those who are older might have heard of him. He's this atheist Hindu guru that came from India, and he was quite famous there, I guess. And he came to the States, and he was trying to establish some sort of community. And it's almost like a utopian type of community they were trying to establish. And they came outside of Seattle. I can't remember the name of, it's one of those small cities. And they bought all the property to the degree that they just basically bought the whole town. And they just about drove the original residents out. They took over the police force, even all the weapons. They had their own police force. They also hired a mayor from amongst themselves. And this group is such a fascinating thing to watch in this documentary. Just a word of warning, that has a couple of explicit scenes because let's face it, it's they were a sexually permissive community. But aside from those couple of scenes that you can skip through, it's fascinating to see the rest of how that dynamic was. They all dressed the same. They all spoke the same. They all did the same type of thing. It was quite a uniform existence that they had over there. And as I watched that, and just the way that they treated the guru, Osho, Bhagwan, as the way that they treated him and interacted with him and surrounded him, and as he stepped on stage and the way that they were just all starry-eyed watching this guru, it really struck a nerve for me because there were a lot of parallels that I can see with the way I want to say folkloric tasawwuf is being conducted, especially in the Western context. And so that's trigger one. Trigger two, or the thing that really motivated me now I really got to talk about this, is over the past couple of weeks, I've been getting an uptick of questions and messages about tariqas, giving bay'ah to a shaykh, pledging allegiance is the English translation for that. Pledging allegiance to the shaykh. How does that work? And oftentimes, most of you who have been sending me these messages, you were asking, and I can tell just from the way that you wrote your message, that you were feeling uneasy about it. There was something that was not sitting in well with you with regards to the whole thing. But maybe, I don't know what specifically is going on around you, but potentially the social context in which you are running in, friends, companions, family members, maybe they're part of this tariqah, and so you feel some sort of social pressure that, everybody says I should do this. Not to mention also, you hear some scholars say things like, "Man la shaykha lahu fa shaytanu shaykhuhu," that whoever doesn't have a shaykh, like a spiritual guide, then shaitan is their spiritual guide. I mean, you've heard these things before. And so you feel like I need to do something about this. And so that's why I feel now the urge that I have to just, put something together and share with you guys what I think about this subject, based on my learning, my study, and maybe I should just give a conflict of interest declaration type of a thing as they do in scientific journal articles. How I was trained, my teacher, Ustad Adil, who is a student of Murabat al-Hajj, may Allah have mercy on his soul. Those of you who don't know, Murabat al-Hajj has passed away he returned to his Lord this past week. And so it's been quite a difficult time for his students. So pray for them to have patience, and also pray for Murabat al-Hajj. May Allah grant him the highest station of paradise and in paradise, and grant him the companionship of the beloved sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam, and to broaden and make vast his grave and turn it into a garden of the gardens of paradise. Murabat al-Hajj, I've heard stories from my teacher that, it's just an amazing things that you don't know about in public, that only his students will relate to you, kind of a thing. And I was hoping to go this December during my break to Mauritania to make a visit, but قدر الله ما شاء فعل, this was not granted for us here. So alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. But just back to the subject matter. This lineage, this school of learning, let's say, of Islam, the Mauritanians in general, at least from what I understand and what I was taught, stay away from tariqas, is in a nutshell is what we were told. There's no such thing as give a bay'ah to a shaykh, pledge allegiance, surrender yourself. None of that. It's all pathological. It's all problematic. It's all spiritually abusive. Stay away from tariqas. What they advocate for is get teachers. You need teachers to study Islam. So if you are desiring to get closer to your Lord, the way that you would do it is you would seek out teachers who will teach you Quran, so that you can memorize the Quran and study tafsir. You will seek teachers also to teach you the hadith collections. You will seek teachers that will teach you fiqh, which is really important. I find it really amazing that you have certain groups that talk about tasawwuf and purification, and then you ask them about basic rulings regarding prayer. Like when you're traveling, they can't answer you. After spending years with a shaykh, they can't answer a basic question about how do I make up my fast if I'm traveling, or how do I fast if I'm traveling, if I'm leaving just before sunrise or after sunrise, whatever. Basic questions they're unable to answer, and yet they speak about tasawwuf, which to me, Imam al-Junaid, rahimahullah, he is like where all of this really goes back to. He is the source of the stream of tasawwuf, if you will, from scholarly perspective. He said, من لم يحفظ القرآن ويقرأ السنة فلا يتحدث في أمرنا هذا. Whoever has not memorized the Quran and studied the Sunnah, let them not speak on this affair of ours. And any group setting, any shaykh that you surround yourself, that you're as a group surrounding, that does not emphasize your study of the legal aspect of the Sharia. It's like Imam Malik said, من تصوف من تفقه ولم يتصوف فقد تزندق. ومن تصوف ولم يتفقه فقد تزندق ومن جمع بينهما فقد تحقق. So Imam Malik is reported to have said, whoever takes on fiqh, so just studying fiqh, legal rulings, and that's it, and they do not study the tazkiyah, the tasawwuf aspect of this religion, this person will become a heretic. Because al-wazi' al-dakhili, as we say, it's like this internal security mechanism of, just attaining this awareness and consciousness in your heart will not be honed in enough. And what you will find in studying law is that, like Imam al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah said something like, it's the easiest thing is to find loopholes. Like anybody who studies a lot of fiqh, they will be able to manipulate the ruling in a way where it's like, yeah, I could see how this is valid. That comes out of a place of lack of taqwa. And so that's why Imam Malik said that if you just do fiqh and you don't do tasawwuf, you'll become a zindiq, you'll become a heretic, because you'll just find yourself loopholes everywhere. And whoever does tasawwuf but does not do the legal aspect, that person is going to become a fasiq. That person is going to become a profligate. They will sin. They will fall into error all the time. Fasiq is like a state. Now you're always in a state of sin because you don't know how to conduct your acts of worship properly. You don't know what the rulings are on a lot of basic things because you haven't been doing that. And that is pseudo-spirituality. That is fake Sufism. And whoever combines between the two of them, وَمَنْ جَمَعَ بَيْنَهُمَا فَقَدْ تَحَقَّقَ. The person who combines between the two of those, this person attains true reality. So that's how. And tasawwuf, as one of the scholars I heard say, when he was asked, like, what is tasawwuf? And he said, tasawwuf is the following of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's it. The essence of tasawwuf is to follow ittiba'u sunnah, to follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is not to run around a shaykh and talk about the shaykh wherever you go and have this adoration of the shaykh that goes to such an extreme level where you don't even do your own tasks. You just watch the shaykh do his thing and you almost live vicariously through the shaykh. That's not tasawwuf. And it's also not just, pledging allegiance and then getting a set of awrad and that's all you do. As if that's tasawwuf. Tasawwuf is just you sitting around, not doing your work, not engaging with the world, not fulfilling your obligations, just because you need to engage in dhikr. Sometimes spirituality is used as a hanger for people to justify or to facilitate their lower self's laziness. That's a lot of what I see personally from just, observation alone. A lot of what I see in tasawwuf is pathological laziness. People just they're running away from responsibilities. They're running away from the world. And they think that they can find fulfillment in sitting around some shaykh and just doing dhikr day and night. And that's it. And that's what you get. This is not to rebuke dhikr. This is not to, say that the shaykh is wrong, whatever. I'm just saying, don't hang your laziness on the sharia or on tasawwuf. And unfortunately, that's what happens. Moreover, when you don't have study of the law itself, when you don't understand what the legal rulings are, you find yourself putting yourself in positions where you're engaged in actions and activities or thinking that you attain some sort of reality or some sort of certainty through the experience that you're having just by being there. I gotta tell you something. I just started, I stopped ever since Michael Jordan retired. I lost my love for basketball. I was like, that's it. Basketball sucks now. I'm not going to watch it. And I unfortunately have deprived myself from the Kobe years. And now I'm just catching up. Sometimes whenever I'm like on the bus, I'll look up YouTube clips of Kobe Bryant and just to see like, what did he get up to? How did Kobe Bryant? And I missed that whole era, which I'm just now sad about. But now I'm catching up on what's happening in the NBA recently, and it's like, my God, the Steph Curry is insane. Now, when I watch videos of Steph Curry, like, I can feel, you have, let's put the neuroscience hat on for a second. You have mirror neurons in your brain. And what mirror neurons do is, as you watch a game, the reason you get so excited and you feel so amped up when you watch any game is because your brain, if I were to put a cap on your brain, and put a cap on your head and a cap on Steph Curry's head, for example, the same neurons are firing. He's scoring threes from half court. Your brain thinks that you're scoring threes from half court. And so you get excited and you get moved and stuff. So what a lot of people end up doing with these groups of, surrounding some shuyukh is it's basically like watching an NBA game. You're watching the shaykh engage in his dhikr. You're watching the shaykh engage in his prayers. You're observing the shaykh left, right, and center. Meanwhile, you're not doing anything. You're just sitting around. I mean, I'm not kidding myself. When I watch Steph Curry, I get excited. I clap. I like, oh my God, I have the reactions. I'm not going to think all of a sudden that I'm able to go out there and score threes after having not touched a basketball for the last however many years, that all of a sudden now I got the Steph Curry juice, that I can now score these. I'm an NBA player at the Steph Curry level. That's exactly what these people do. And what ends up happening when they leave the shaykh? It's a downtime. It's a down spiral. The shaykh is necessary for their uplifting, which tells you something is wrong about whatever relationship you have going on with that shaykh. If they are not imparting tools onto you that you can now go and practice on your own so that you can elevate and help yourself. It's like watching somebody in the gym right now. You go to the gym. Oh, I go to the gym. What do you do in the gym? I just sit around and watch people work out and then call that a workout. As if. So this is kind of what I'm starting to observe more and more over these past few months, couple of years, of an increasing number of people just kind of go along with that. And recently we had this discussion about hadras and whatnot, and people just engage. Tasawwuf now has been reduced to let's get together. It's a potluck. Everybody brings some food. Let's have some nasheeds recited. And then if it's a hadra, let's get up and bounce around. And you watch some videos. I mean, I don't care who the scholar is, by the way. With all due respect to all the scholars. But that activity is asinine. Flat out. Let's just call a spade a spade. Tartib al-Madarik al-Qadi Iyad. This text by Qadi Iyad in the second volume. Great Maliki scholar. He relates a story about Imam Malik. A man came to a group of men were sitting around Imam Malik as companions, and a man came to Imam Malik. And this man came from Iraq. And it's interesting that a lot of this arose out of Iraq, where it was a lot of meeting point between, the Zoroastrians and the Muslims and the atheists. And it was like a hub of just a lot of, like a melting pot. A lot of thought, different streams of thought came there. And that's where you find the advent of Aqidah, debates, and different theologies, and what all came out of that area. And tasawwuf as well. Now this man comes to Imam Malik and he said, we have a group of people, they're called Sufis. They eat a lot, and then they recite nasheeds, and then they get up and they dance. عندنا قوم يقال لهم الصوفية يأكلون كثيرا ثم يأخذون في القصائد ثم يقومون فيرقصون. فقال مالك, so Imam Malik said to him, أصبيان هم? Are they little children? And the man said, قال لا. He said no. Imam Malik said, فقال أما جانين هم? Are they insane? Are they madmen? The man said, قال لا. هم قوم مشايخ وغير ذلك عقلاء. Actually, no. They are shuyukh. They're like scholars. And other than this activity that they engage in, where they eat a lot and they recite nasheeds and then get up and bounce around, other than that, they're intelligent people. They're well put together. You can have debates with them. They study. They do all of the right things. But this thing they do, I'm just wondering what's up with that. فقال مالك, so Imam Malik said, ما سمعت أن أحدا من أهل الإسلام يفعل هذا. I have never heard that anybody from the people of Islam would do this. Never heard of that. فقال له الرجل, so the man replied, بل يأكلون ثم يقومون ويرقصون دوائب ويلطم بعضهم رأسه وبعضهم وجهه. Actually, no, they eat, then they get up and they dance with effort. We're talking about, you see some of these videos on YouTube, they're sweating. It's like a workout. It's like a Zumba. Is it Zumba? It's a Zumba workout. And then they strike their heads and they strike their faces. فضحك مالك ثم قال ثم قام فدخل منزله فقال أصحاب مالك. So Imam Malik laughed and then he stood up and entered into his home. He left the gathering. So the companions of Imam Malik turned to the man and said, لقد كنت يا هذا مشؤوما على صاحبنا. Hey buddy, you're a bad omen on our companion here. لقد جالسناه نيفا وثلاثين سنة ما رأيناه ضحك إلا في هذا اليوم. We sat with him for over 30 years. We never saw him laugh, i.e. in the way that you just made him laugh by the story of yours, until now. This is the first day we see him laugh like this. شر البلية ما يضحك. The worst of calamities are the ones that make you laugh. You know when you hear some news that's just such a bad piece of news that's just like the only reaction, it's an inappropriate reaction, but it's the only thing you have left now. It's like it's such an unbelievable thing that happened. Like you can't help but just find yourself chuckling a little bit. That's how Imam Malik, he just laughed at this. So this type of business of you call that tasawwuf, and it's not emphasizing study and learning, and it emphasizes dedication to a shaykh of some kind, as if the shaykh is exalted. I mean, I've heard even of a shaykh recently where the people were asking me about him, and they said, well, yeah, he came to the gathering, and then he said, when you look at me, you're looking at, and he claims, I don't know if it's true or not. These claims come a lot, by the way. He claims to be of the progeny of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he claims to be from Ahl al-Bayt. And he said, when you're looking at me, you're looking at the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I was like, red flag, alarm bells going off left, right, and center. Get up and leave this gathering. This is not a person you need to be around. Claiming to be like, oh, when you look at me, you're looking at the Messenger. I don't think so. So because of this, I thought what I would do for you is, in this episode, go over 4 separate... I looked around and just did some research and digging around for different papers on this subject, because, I'm just going to be a scientist about it, to try to define what makes a cult a cult. Because some of the stories that I've heard and some of the things that I've seen, the first thing that comes to mind, and then when I watched that Wild Wild West, I was like, this is exactly what I see in some gatherings, and the way that certain collective groups interact with their shaykh and the way that they are. Yeah, that's exactly what they do. So it's a cult. So the questions that I asked myself in searching for this, what makes a cult a cult? Like, how do you define a cult? Because if you look at social science research, they'll tell you every religion, if you go by any of these definitions, it starts off as a cult, and then it expands to a degree where it no longer qualifies for that definition. But cult, in the modern sense, it's used as a derogatory term. So you can't really apply that to religion per se, and it's difficult to define. So I looked into what makes a cult a cult. I looked into who joins these groups, because there is an interesting shared quality at the cognitive and the emotional level between the people who get attracted to these settings. And so I asked myself, well, what makes them go there? And then I asked myself, well, if it's difficult to define how a cult is a cult, and a religion is a religion, what's the difference between the two? Is there a criteria that I can use to look at any group and then determine for myself that this group has a healthy spiritual dynamic, and this group has a negative spiritual dynamic? And buttress all of these questions basically under the rubric of, well, how does this fit in with the Quran and the Sunnah? How is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How does the Quran teach us to be? Putting all that together, this is what this episode is really about. So just to start off with, the first one, I'm selecting, just for the sake of time, by the way, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can find. I'm selecting the ones that I thought were the clearest ones to get through. I'm going to put the PDF for all of these in the website. So you can go to andalusonline.org to the page for this podcast episode, and you'll find the links for the PDF for each one of these papers that I'm going to go through with you here. The one of them, the meta-analysis one is going to take us a while. This is going to be the bulk of the episode, and 3 are going to be shorter. So the first one is one from 1996. It's from Cleveland State University. Dina Davis noted that defining what makes a cult is difficult, but we can speak of certain qualities that make a cult. So if I can't define it, well, are there telltale signs that I can look for? There are some basic characteristics, according to Dina Davis. These include, they're all relatively high demand religions. They require much more of their followers than weekly church attendance and the nominal tithe. So in other words, when you look in the Sunnah, where the Prophet ﷺ, for example, was never given a choice except that he took the easiest one of them as long as it's a halal choice. No, what you'll find in a cult is that, no, they'll take the high road, make it more difficult on yourself. If you look at what is demanded of you in Islam, you have the 5 daily prayers, right? And then you have Raghibat al-Fajr, which is a little bit above the Sunnah, but below an obligatory act. There's 2 rak'ahs before Fajr. And then your Shifa and Witr, which are below obligatory, but they're above Sunnah as well. These are the things that you have to do as bare minimum. And then if you want to do extra acts of Sunnah or whatever, pray 2 rak'ahs after Maghrib. You have these, they're not difficult and they're not overly time consuming. What you'll find in certain groups is, no, they'll give you awrad that will take basically your whole day. You won't be able to get anything done because you'll be so tasked with needing to finish these things. And I'll pause here for a second and just tell you something. The concept of worship in Islam, we have Christianized it, by the way. I find the hadith is very interesting. Everybody's heard the hadith of you will follow the ways of those that have come before you. Inch by inch, arm span by arm span, until they enter into the lizard's hole, you'll enter after them. And the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ, Al-Yahudu al-Nasara, the Jews and the Christians, O Messenger of Allah. And he said, فَمَنَ الْقَوْمِ? And he ﷺ said, who are the people then? We've turned Islam into, for something to be properly Islamic, the way that a lot of Muslims think about it today, or for something to be properly spiritual, it needs to be ritual. It needs to be either you're praying, or you're sitting down and just doing dhikr, or you're reciting Quran, you're just with the masbahah, you're just doing tasbih. That's what makes it spiritual, and that's now you're engaged. That makes you kind of a righteous person. But that is not, this is so limiting to what the reality of this religion is. I'll give you an example from my own life. I do my awrad, I do my adhkar, I do all of these things. But when it comes to exam time, I know that if it's all about your intention. My intention, and this is also for people in medical school. Some people in med school feel bad, like, oh, I'm not memorizing Quran, I'm not like sitting down doing my adhkar, I'm only doing the bare minimum. Listen, if you are doing this with the right intention, your study of medicine becomes an act of worship. If you approach it every day with a renewed intention that I'm trying to understand the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the human being, and I'm also training myself to help human beings in their health, save lives, this is the intention, to seek Allah's pleasure. You then have transformed your whole study of medicine. The whole time that you're doing it, it becomes your dhikr, becomes going through Robin's basic pathology, or Sattar's pathoma. That becomes your dhikr for the States guys doing your USMLEs. That becomes your dhikr. You literally, every time you study, you are engaged in an act of worship. Worship in Islam is not restricted to the prayer and the tasbih and just the reciting of the Quran. You can expand it into all of these things. You can turn going to the gym. You know, there's nothing more detestable. I really dislike it personally. I just, I don't judge the person per se, but I'm disappointed when I see somebody who's especially attributed to sacred knowledge. People who are imams, shuyukhs, whatnot. But generally speaking, I don't like seeing Muslims out of shape. It bothers me. Go work out, take care of yourself. You know the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have in the tradition, either his stomach was flat, or in other narrations, كانت له تموجات. He had waves in his stomach, talking about his abs. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam had abs. He used to walk instead of ride his mule. That's a sunnah for you to walk. Get your 10,000 steps. If you want to talk about 10,000 steps, all right, I'm going to do this as a sunnah. I'm going to go work out and watch my food intake so that I can take care of my body and make sure that this trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, has given me, that I take care of it, and that I look presentable. I look good. So that's, and I know some of the sisters have had somebody come back at me once and is like, what if I like my husband to be a little bit, chubby? I'm like, no, you should not like that. That is unhealthy, high cholesterol, diabetes risk, and it is not like, it is unbecoming of a proper Muslim who wants to be upon the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So don't tell me that you like your husband to be chubby and have a premature death because of heart disease. So you need to take care of yourself. And once you do that with the intention, then all of a sudden going to the gym becomes an act of worship. Every rep becomes like a tasbih for you because you're taking care of your body. So you have to expand your understanding, your concept of worship. We talk about Islam as being a comprehensive religion. This is what it means for it to be a comprehensive religion. Not a totalitarian religion in the sense that you have to make rulings about every single thing so that you can turn it into an act of worship or whatever, or ritualize it or whatever. So this is one aspect of a cult. A cult will take you out of the world. Any group that takes you out of the world and puts you into an act of just high demand of rituals and turns the religion into a difficult thing to practice so that you can just maintain the high order of things that the shaykh is giving you to do, that is red flag number 1. Red flag number 2, they all have a charismatic leader. You sit down in the class and you say, oh, mashallah, so profound. Mashallah, this is amazing. This is just something else. This person, charismatic leader, that is not to say that every time you're in the presence of a charismatic leader or a speaker or whatever, that it's automatically bad. But you have to look at all these things in combination. So they have a charismatic leader. This person attracts a lot of people around him. This person convinces people to do things that under other normal circumstances they may not do it. And that's where some parents feel like their kids are being brainwashed, is because of the charismatic leader in the setting of high demand. The third red flag that to look for is they most involve communal living, at least as an option and very often as a requirement. So they'll tell you, we all need to live in the same kind of area. We all have to be together in the same place. Maybe they have some sort of facility that they now own, and so everybody has to live in this facility. So that's red flag number 3. It's at least an option, but in most cases it's required. They all have to be in the same place. The fourth red flag, they most focus their conversion attempts upon young, idealistic, and because of the particular setting that this researcher was in, mostly white and middle class. Let's take away mostly white. Let's talk within a Muslim context. Muslims come in all kinds of different colors. Young, idealistic, and middle class. These are the ones that get most of the focus from these groups. They're the ones that the groups with organizations, shaykh, whatever, that they focus on these types of individuals. So when you have a mix of young, idealistic, middle class individuals surrounding a charismatic leader, all choosing to be living within the same vicinity of each other, and participating in a setting in which the context is a high demand context. It's not just about, in an Islamic setting, it's not just about study your religion so that you can practice it properly. No. There's like a lot more now. It becomes something else that makes you stand apart from the rest of the community. So that's paper 1 out of the way. Just looking at some qualities and things to look for that would make a cult. Davis here says that it's very difficult to find a definition or to come to a conclusive answer about what makes a cult versus not. It's very hard. But these are generally things that you can find shared amongst new religious movements and cult type of settings. Second one is a 2007 study from the Center of Psychology of Religion, and this came out of a university in Belgium, the University Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. Crowley, Buxant, and colleagues looked into the cognitive and emotional characteristics of new religious movement members. So when I say new religious movement here, I'm including in it these new groups of, give a bay'ah to the shaykh or whatever. A couple of things that I'll just share with you from this paper, and you can read the whole thing on the PDF that I'll link. Results confirm the need to go beyond the simplistic psychopathology versus normality debate in reference to the members of those groups. Oftentimes when people talk about these groups, they say like, oh, they must be like mental health issues. They must be ill of some, they must have some psychological problems. That's why they're in this. And the results show that actually many of them don't have, they're classified when you look at their tests, they're normal classification. They're not ill. These people are perfectly cognitively normal. There are no issues there. But there are several signs of psychological vulnerability of these members that emerged, especially in terms of personal history and predispositions. So you might be normal, but you could be more predisposed. So for example, we're all, let's say that listen to this, will be classified in a psychiatric sense as healthy individuals. But we all have different, if you want to say, different capacity to put up with high stress situations. An extreme example of that would be being in a war setting. Many people don't experience PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but some do. And when you go and look into the individuals who experience PTSD and end up having that problem later on after, let's say, being exposed to some sort of a car bomb, those people have a shared psychological profile. They have a lower tolerance to high stress situations, and so the impact of that circumstance is a lot heavier on them than most other people who go through the same thing and they're able to put up with it and they can move on. So what they found with these, all right, so everybody is relatively on the same playing field here, but there is a psychological profile for the individuals who get attracted to these, again, I'm going to use it here in a Muslim setting, to groups where you have, let's go around the shaykh and just be with the shaykh and do whatever the shaykh says. Number one is an insecure attachment to their fathers. Quite a number of them, actually, a high percentage of the people that enter. This is not to say that generalize absolutely 100%, by the way. As you listen to this, know that we're talking here about majority. We're not talking about everybody. And so if you're able to think of exceptions, that does not disprove the fact that the majority are this way. So an insecure attachment to the father is the first thing that seems to emerge from this as a sign. The second one is somewhat problematic relations with the family in the beginning, before joining the group, right before joining the group, and especially during the joining process. There was some sort of tension in the home with the family. There were fights happening as before they joined the group, and then as they started to join the group, these fights continued and maybe intensified. The third thing is a somewhat negative view of personal well-being in the past. They have a reported depressive tendency. So if you have these individuals, now that they're part of this Tariqa or whatever it is that they have going on, you ask them about, all right, let's just look into your past and do an assessment of that. You'll find that they actually score high on this depressive tendency. And then finally is a high need for cognitive closure. Cognitive closure is, I need a definitive answer. I don't want to stay in the gray zone. I need black or white. So when you combine these four things together, that makes the average individual who would be likely to be attracted to these cults. So insecure attachment to the father, tensions with the family, generally speaking, negative view of personal well-being just before joining, and now that they're part of this thing, they feel better. They have a positive view of it. And then finally, a high need for closure. They want to just have an answer to something. So that's the second paper that I wanted to share with you. And again, the link for that will be in the website for the page for this episode. Now, the bulk of the episode is actually going to go through this systematic review that was done by Sebastian Merkin and Suzanne Namini, 2007. And they looked into childhood familial experiences and how they can serve as antecedents of adult membership in new religious movements. And the question they asked was, is it possible to identify specific familial patterns as antecedents of adult membership in new religious movements? And can the choice of a new religious movement be predicted by childhood experiences of individuals joining such movements? Now, the international literature that they looked at empirical studies, which is a pretty powerful thing. This is not a qualitative study. This is looking at quantitative studies now. They were looked at German, English, and French papers written since 1970. They tried to combine as many papers as possible from different parts of the planet, even though they're all Western kind of a setting, but this is what we're working with. Different countries in the Western setting. But anyways, it still has some validity there. And they wanted to see if this can give an overview of findings on childhood family structures. They wanted to look at parents and siblings as well as early family relationships and atmospheres. And what they found was, on the whole, the studies from the different countries and decades support the hypothesis that early family experiences have an impact on adult membership in new religious movements. Now, the parents were concerned about their sons and daughters who left universities and promising careers to follow unfamiliar religious leaders and join their groups. And even today, new religious movements are accused of being not only anti-self or anti-society, but they're also anti-family. There's another thing that you can actually add to the signs of, am I in a cult or not? If you find that you're, whatever group you're in, the manifestation of your membership is increased tensions with the family, and we're not talking about because you are upholding some sort of truth and they disagree with the specific truth. Like people talk about Ammar ibn Yasir, for example, and not Ammar ibn Yasir. Oh, what's the other companion's name? Oh, the name escapes me right now. One of the companions, his mother, radiallahu anhu, his mother refused to eat. She said she would starve herself. This is early on in Mecca. If he does not go back and leave Islam. And he said, I love you, Mom. You know, I respect you. I'll do anything for you. But even if you died and came back and starved yourself again and died again, I would not leave this religion. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody who is supposedly becoming spiritual, supposedly is becoming a Sufi, and that manifestation, the manifestation of his spirituality is tension with the family in general. So you can add that as another sign. And so the parents, actually, even from the 70s, it was the parents that started this whole movement to try to they tried to mobilize each other because they were starting to lose their children, especially in America, the 70s. All these cults and New Age religions and stuff that were coming about. They mobilized and they tried to get, even went legislation to try to ban these groups because they saw something sinister in them. Now, these authors here continue on and say, at the same time, scholars have repeatedly questioned the widespread assumption that new religious movements have a destructive impact on families. A quarter of a century ago, Brock Kilborn and James Richardson critically asked whether there was not a case of misattribution of cause. And 20 years later, John Saliba wrote, it would, however, be naive to conceive of the new religions mainly as disruptors of family life. Joining a new movement might be an indicator that all is not well at home. So what they're saying here is that, well, maybe it's not just that the being part of this cult or religious movement or whatever you want to call it, joining this Tariqa, it's not that is causing my tension at home. Maybe I already had tension at home. Maybe there was problems in my family dynamics, and that's what drove me to become part of this group. Psychological research has shown that early family experiences have long-term effects on an individual's life and development. Moreover, studies from psychology of religion have demonstrated that these early experiences impact adult religiosity. And so, for a systemic approach of the findings of early family antecedents to adult memberships in new religious movements, the authors here distinguish two types of early nuclear family experiences. Experiences A was experiences with authority figures, i.e., the parents, including the family, the family atmosphere, and B, experiences with peers, siblings. So they first looked at experiences with parents and the family atmosphere. And I'm just going to read for you guys a few things that from just a couple of choice selections from the paper here. In her study on early family antecedents of conversions to Roman Catholicism, Orthodox Judaism, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, and Baha'i, Chana Ullman showed that in all of these individuals, emotional factors prior to the conversion seem to be much more important than cognitive ones. A much higher proportion from the convert group than from the non-convert control group reported an extremely unhappy childhood and a greater number of traumatic events. Nearly 80% of the converts, women as well as men, reported that their fathers had been either absent, passive unavailable, or actively rejecting, whereas only 23% of the control group did so. About 1/3 had no or only very little contact with their biological fathers from the ages of 4 or 5, which was about 3 times higher than the norm reported for the average white American population. Altogether, converts also perceived the relationship to their mothers as having been more problematic than non-converts. In his study, Alexander Deutsch reported that virtually all of the 14 devotees of an American guru had histories of unsatisfactory parental relationships. In explaining their improved mental states, they would frequently contrast Baba's attitudes and teachings and the atmosphere of their new family with the attitudes and conduct of their parents and other authority figures. Deutsch and Michael Miller studied 4 women who had joined the Unification Church in their early 20s. All of them reported a disturbed family background. 3 of the converts had a similar pattern in their family histories. Parents were usually distant to each other. In 2 cases, they were divorced. The participants characterized their mothers as unaffectionate, while they regarded their fathers fondly despite perceived shortcomings. Tommy H. Poling and J. Frank Kenny's biographical data on 32 converts to ISKCON, so this is the Krishna organization, revealed that 31% of devotees reported the death of a parent and another 31% reported parental divorce before they joined ISKCON. Apart from a sunset orientation, which Poling and Kenny found to be characteristic of the individual studied as well as the group-specific mythology, rituals, and lifestyle, the authors identified early family discord, especially the absence of the father, as a predisposing factor specific to converts to the Hare Krishna movement. ISKCON compensates for this loss in the person and authority of the guru, who is viewed as the ideal father, that is, a person who is firm, understanding, knowledgeable, saintly, and experienced. Janet Jacobs, who studied 40 former religious devotees of non-traditional religious movements with a charismatic leader and patriarchal structure, similarly emphasized the desire to experience both the ideal family and the fathering of a protective and loving male authority figure. Dieter Roman, in a German questionnaire study, surveyed family members and or friends who had sought advice because one or more family members or friends had joined a cult, that is a group from one of the following categories: a Christian fundamentalist group, a guru movement, or a psychic cult esoteric group. He concluded that people who join cults do not come from divorced families or broken homes more frequently. However, he found that a dysfunctional family background, for example, a family situation characterized by conflict and disharmony, was reported for 89% of the cases. In a movement more often than the other two groups. Esoteric, the 2 groups came from divorce and family situations where members of the guru. In a comparative analysis, he found individuals who had joined psychic cults or esoteric movements more often than the other 2 groups came from divorced families and had experienced strained family situations, whereas members of guru movements rarely reported difficult family backgrounds. Those who had joined a Christian fundamentalist group had more often grown up in families in which personal problems or emotions were hardly discussed. Now, obviously, just as a pause here for a second, we don't have specific data on Muslims and why do they join Sufi tariqas and what drives them to that, and especially in a Western setting. And my concern right now is a Western context. You're a middle class Muslim. You are 21 to 25 to 30, 35, 40, whatever. And you decide to abandon whatever it is that you're seeking, and you now go after this tariqah. And you start to change your behavior, you start to change your dress, your clothing, your mannerisms, your speech, your interactions, all of that for the sake of this. Why is that happening? The thing about the human intellect is that it is so powerful, we can sometimes miss our ability to justify things. And we think that we are cognitively and rationally driven, when in fact we're just post hoc rationalizing behavior. But going along with the Prophet ﷺ's hadith that you will follow the ways of those that have come before you, all right, let's take a look at what's happening with the Christians, for example, and the Jews. And why do they join these groups and these movements? And what are they doing there? And is there some explanatory, contributory factors, socially speaking, that we can look to? Because, and I'll cover this at the end of this, from an Islamic perspective, a lot of what I see happening in these groups is un-Islamic. Looking at siblings, in most studies, converts to new religious movements report coming from relatively large families. Kuhner found that compared to the general West German population, the subjects of all three groups came from families with a disproportionately large number of children. 43% of members of the Children of God, 45% members of the Unification Church, and 33% of the Ananda Marga came from families with 4 or more siblings, whereas only 8% of the general population did. Now, based on their this review of looking at all of these different factors, the authors here offer their kind of conclusion. And they say many of the studies seem to confirm the widespread assumption that membership in new religious movements offers some kind of compensation for individuals with problematic family backgrounds and absent fathers. Thus, they are attracted by groups that have a strong father-oriented theology or emphasize the community and offer a strong male authority figure. An example of that would be ISKCON, Unification Church, New Apostolic Church, and seem to promise the ideal family or ideal father. In a similar way, individuals with absent mothers may be attracted to groups with mother figures and mother-oriented theologies. It seems that neither the characteristics of the person nor the features of the religious group alone can sufficiently explain the membership process, but that the interaction, more precisely the fit between the person and the group, is important. So this is where you have, why do some Muslims turn Salafi, for example? And why do some Muslims prefer the Sufi way? And why do some Muslims enter into these tariqas? And why do some Muslims, engage in other activities? Whatever the case, it's the specific fit between the two groups. That doesn't mean that one is wrong and one is right, but we're now just judging. This is just to say how the judgment is going to come about from the Quran and the Sunnah. But just looking at, all right, what attracts people to certain things? It's important for us to know this, because if, for you listening, if you're wondering why you find something attractive, and you find out that, and even despite that, it might be harmful to you, it's good for you to know what gets you attracted to it. Is there something in your background? Is it some desire that you have that is actually extra religious? It's not really a religious desire. It's just something to do with your desire to have a connected family. And so this is where you find it. It's almost like vicariously through them you have a family. Some individuals with unhappy family backgrounds may find a solution for their inner conflicts in a group that offers an ideal family, whereas others who may prefer a new religious movement with a therapeutic offer for a high emphasis on individualism. Some may choose a group that offers an emotional relationship with a religious figure or a very personal father-like God concept. Others may choose a cognition-based faith or a more impersonal God. Therefore, the role of the father, which is obviously of major importance, must be better understood. Although Freud has often been criticized for his view of religion, his early assumption that religion provides people with an exalted father seems plausible for at least some of the cases, thus encouraging researchers to pay more attention to psychoanalytical and other developmental theories. And that's kind of where it ends with this paper. And just finally, the final one is actually a chapter from a book, 2009 book, Spirituality and Psychiatry. It's edited by Chris Cook. I put up the PDF of that chapter up on the website as well. It's by Nikki Crowley and Jilly Jenkinson. They authored this chapter on, the title of the chapter is Pathological Spirituality. And they included a table where they compare healthy versus potentially harmful spiritual groups. So let's just go through it one by one here. A healthy religious or a spiritual group, they will create a conversion or a worldview shift. That's what they were looking for. You know, it's something. Conversion means that you internally generated this conversion. You thought about things, you investigated, you studied, this makes sense, and so you experience a conversion. Your world shift changes. An example of that is people that become Muslim. The second you start to, if there are any non-Muslims listening to this, I highly recommend you read Islam and the Destiny of Man by Charles Guy Eaton, and read Islam Between East and West by Ali Izzat Begovich. And if you happen to be in my vicinity, hit me up. We can have a chat. But it's really, once you have that worldview shift, that's now internally generated, as opposed to coercion or coercive persuasion conversion. Coercive persuasion conversion. So you're basically using psychological tools as opposed to intellectual tools. You're appealing to emotions to get somebody to feel guilty for not being spiritually connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you do the bait and switch. Here's the shaykh has an offer for you. This is the one who you need to be around. So you do it through guilt as opposed to through intellectual persuasion. In a healthy religious group, you'll have your commitment is freely chosen. You want to be here? Ya ahlan wa sahlan. Come on down. You don't want to be here? It's fine too. Come whenever you want, leave whenever you want. Whereas the commitment for the cult style group or the harmful group would be more of a psychological force. That leaving creates psychological harm for you. You feel this sense of obligation to be there, as opposed to a healthy religious group where it's not a sense of obligation. It's like people are happy to see you, and you're there. And if you are not there, it's fine too. In a healthy group, the relationship that you have will be between the individual and God. So if there is a shaykh there who's really a shaykh, is really a teacher, and this is really about your spiritual development, what you will find this teacher doing is always connecting you with God. This is always about God. It's always driving you towards God. Everything is about God. In a harmful group, it will be between the individual and the group. It's more important to have your membership in the group validated. It's more important that the shaykh likes you. It's more important that you're in the good graces of the shaykh. It's more important that the shaykh does not get disappointed in you. That's more important. Now you look at the way that the Prophet ﷺ and the way that the companions were around him. That's not how they were. They were more concerned with their relationship with Allah. They looked at the Messenger ﷺ as a means towards God, and they still maintained their sense of self, even with their own sins and their own shortcomings. An example of that is Nu'ayman, who was a drunkard. He had a problem with alcohol, but he used to play pranks on the Prophet ﷺ, practical jokes and pranks on the Prophet ﷺ, on Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, on Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. He was a jokester. He was still himself. And his relationship was with Allah, and the Prophet ﷺ was always patient with him, and he used to laugh even at his jokes. A healthy religious group empowers its members. I personally prefer to teach you a couple of texts on Aqidah in a way where you start to think for yourself, give you the tools, and then you can now engage. Nothing gives me more joy than to have students sometimes contact me and say, man, that like when I what we studied, what we covered in that class, I was at the university, we took this class on whatever, biology or physics or whatever, and the professor was saying these things, and I could totally see like this is why this is wrong, or why this is not appropriate, or why this is rational, or why this is illogical, whatever. brings me so much joy because I now know that like I feel good now. You can be on your own. You don't need me. A harmful group, they will disempower members. You will become dependent. A harmful group will not teach you to become independent. They will not. So, for example, you will not have in an Islamic setting, you won't have much emphasis on fiqh in such a group, thus rendering you always dependent upon the shaykh, having to always ask for a fatwa for everything, as opposed to let's teach you your religion so that you can be on your own. A healthy group increases discernment. A healthy group will try to get you to see through things. A harmful group will decrease your ability to see truth from falsehood. A healthy group has unconditional love for members. And this is back again to the Prophet ﷺ. Nu'ayman, a drunkard, and he still had love. Even when the companions were hitting him for drinking, he said, leave him, for I know that he loves Allah and His Messenger. That's how the Prophet ﷺ was. He didn't judge people in that sense where it's like excommunicado, you cannot be around us and stuff, except for situations where it was like life and death and treasonous acts and whatever. That's a different context. But we're talking just the community amongst each other. He ﷺ had unconditional love for everybody. Whereas in a harmful group, you'll have conditional love for members. Your love hinges upon your behavior and how I feel about it. A healthy group recognizes and values the family, whereas a harmful group alienates members from the family. So if you do Islam right, and this is really more for the converts and the newly discovering themselves Muslims, if your practice of Islam starts to strain your relationship, you're doing something wrong in your practice of Islam. And again, I'm moving beyond the point of they don't like the belief. I'm just talking about your normal interaction with your family. If you've become a type of person who's difficult to be around because of your quote unquote I'm spiritual, you got issues. Another one is, and I heard this. Some people, when it comes to spousal obligations, the husband, for example, is spending his time. He doesn't even, let's say, sleep with his wife much because, he's always in prayer and he's always in dhikr or, he's always in Quran recitation, and that's being spiritual. This other so-called shaykh that claimed that, when you see me, you see the messenger. That guy told a couple that, the wife was complaining because her husband was not fulfilling her, her rights as a wife. Like she wanted him to sleep with her and he was just not there. And this so-called sheikh said, he's spiritual. Give me a break. You're not more spiritual than the Prophet ﷺ, and none of his wives never complained about that. So enough of that. So family ties, family kinship, family obligations. The Prophet ﷺ, he cleaned after himself in the house. He helped clean around the house. He helped cook. He helped do all of these things. All of that is being a spiritual. All these things are spiritual actions. Spirituality in Islam is not about just engaging in the ritual. And the more you connect with the family and the stronger you make the bonds, this is a sign that you're in a healthy situation. A healthy religious group also emphasizes individual uniqueness. Whereas a harmful group will create cloned personalities. So let's say that you're somebody who's like again, I have an example from my own life. I remember when I went to Sydney, the guys from Boys in the Cave, shout out to Boys in the Cave podcast. The first time we met, I come off the plane, I'm wearing my jeans and my checkered shirt and my tie. I got a thin tie, and my jeans, I have these like rips in my jeans and stuff. I'm like, sometimes I like to, deck out some fashionable stuff. I think I was wearing like an orange jacket too, like a bright orange jacket. And I get off the plane and I'm chewing gum, and they were shocked at the sight. They were expecting, like you have this, you talk about Islam, you teach, you do all of these things. They have an imagination in their mind, like what a sheikh is going to be. Like, no, man, this is how I dress. This is how I am. This is how I'll be. Yeah, I have like the jalaba, I have the long coat. I have all of these things for specific contexts. I'll wear them. But my general day-to-day like dress and demeanor and the way that I conduct and carry myself, I'm not a profligate. I'm not somebody who's behaving in any questionable ways. But hey, man, I like to put on these clothes and I like to dress in a particular way, and that's how I'll be. So deal with it. This is how I am. It doesn't mean that I studied that I'm going to dress, change the way that I dress, or be something that you imagine that I'm not. Other people in the same group that I studied with, people, friends of mine they dress differently. We all have the same teacher, and he never rebuked anybody for dressing in any particular way. And he embraced everyone as they are, encouraged everyone as they are, promotes everyone in their own trajectory and their own path, as long as it's all on the right track. You know, the Prophet ﷺ says, "تركتكم على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك." I've left you on this. Mahajja is like a really wide road. Like, think of like a 10-lane highway. And it's so clear and wide. And he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, the only one who will go astray from it is someone who's destroyed. Like, you really got to mess up to get out of this. So I go in one lane, you go in the other lane. You know, I like to drive my whatever X8 if one day, maybe a Ferrari. But, I like to do this thing. And so you do your own, and you do you. Imam Malik had a man come to him, and he was a zahid. And Imam Malik was known for his turbans, and he really liked to dress well. After years of poverty and his seeking knowledge, when he became the great scholar that he's become, he used to really dress fancy. He had really fancy turbans. I mean, if you want to put it in a modern context, he was wearing Tom Ford suits. He was really decking it out. And this guy comes to him and was like, Imam Malik, you're the great Imam. MashaAllah. People look at you as an example. You should really, become more of an ascetic person. Give up all of these things and the luxuries of life. And Imam Malik said to him, listen, Jazakumullahu khairan for the advice, but Allah opens different doors to people. And the door that was open for me is the door of seeking knowledge and teaching knowledge. And the door that was open for you is the door of asceticism. So everybody's got their own thing going on. So just you do you and I'll do me. Everybody's on the same. So if you're somebody who likes, I like shoes. I know, Mahin, shout out to the Mad Mamluks. From what I understand, this guy is a shoe addict. He loves his shoes and Air Jordans and whatever shoes collection that he's got. I'd love to one day, inshallah, go and check it out. That's one of my goals in life, is to go see the shoe collection of Mahin. But I hear some things about the shoe collection. He likes this stuff. Just, that's his thing. Do you. You do you. You're somebody who's a comedian and you like to joke around, and that's your thing. Be a comedian. Nobody's saying, like, the way that people look at religion is like, oh, you got to be serious. You can't be this type of jokester. You can't be a prankster. Man, if you're not harming people, you're not being lewd about it. You're not committing evil actions with it. You're not hurting people's feelings in a malicious way. Do your thing. Honestly, this religion is not looking for conformity and uniformity and clone personalities. Everybody's got to be themselves. And the way that you realize, man, if you're not part of the Andalus Book Club, you're missing out on this. And again, another plug. This was a big thing from this book, The Malaise of Modernity, about seeking authenticity. How do you really become an authentic, individual, original person? You do it by connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a transcendent background for yourself, so that you can transcend above the social pressures. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unique. And only through that, then you can realize your own uniqueness come forth. The companions had the serious, had the jokester, had the businessman, they had all kinds of different people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not intend, وَمَا كَانَ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَن يَنْفِرُوا كَافَّةً فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ طَائِفَةٍ. Surah At-Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it was not for the believers, for all of them to become scholars of the religion and to just be one way. Just a group of them. Go and study the religion so that you can go back to your people and teach them and warn them. For the rest of you, Allah threw different loves into your hearts. Some of you like fashion, design. Go design fashion. I wish Muslims would have more of those people that, instead of following the whims of this culture that we live in that does not have anything to do with the sacred, we have people that come in and imbue it with the sacred, so that we have our own fashion houses that design things for both men and women. If that's what you're into, then that's what you're into. Do that. If you're an artist, be that. Be an artist and do these things. We're not looking for uniformity. We're looking for different diversity, and that was the greatness of this Islamic civilization. It was like that. But now, unfortunately, we've Christianized the religion, and we've turned it into kind of a hermetic rahbaniyat and ibtada'uha. It's like for you to be a proper pious Muslim, you need to dress in this really boring way, and you need to look kind of sad and walk around with like a hunch on your back, like as if there's some weight on your shoulders. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu saw a man walking in the streets, and he had like a bit of a hunch, this false humility type of walk, and he smacked him. And he said, what is this? Like, you're debasing Islam. Why are you walking like this? Throw your shoulders back and start to walk up straight. So, I mean, it's just let's just continue on, because this is going to drag on for too long. The other one is for a healthy community is that it focuses on the growth and the maturing of the members, whereas in a harmful group, it will lead to the regression and stunting of the members. If you and I could see that, in some groups, I come and see you on day 1. And if I come and see you on day 60 and you're the exact same person, that's a regression, because nobody ever stays the same. Time has passed, so you're actually regressing. If you're not increased in knowledge, if you are not becoming a transformed person who is becoming better, who is elevating. And we're not talking about you just spent your time in dhikr the whole time. We're talking about like you've taken the gift that God Almighty has given you, and through your proper intention to please Him, employed it in a way that realizes your true authenticity, so that you can become a beacon of light for this tradition. People talk about da'wah as if like it's, you got to talk about Islam to everybody. A form of da'wah is that you become an amazing individual who speaks of the greatness of this religion because of how you conduct yourself and your characters and your mannerisms and your perfection and the things that you do. If you're a physician, to be the best physician out there. If you are an architect, to be the most artistic architect out there who can design the most amazing buildings. And you're doing it because, this is a gift that Allah has given you, and you're doing it for the sake of Allah. That when people say, who built that building? They could say, it's Aisha Fulan, or Siddiq Fulan, or whatever the name is. It's just like these Arabic or, cultural names that give an impression that this person comes from a different, not to say that somebody who's like a John Smith can't be a Muslim, but it's just to give this idea that there is a touch of Islam put in there. Speaking now that the individual uniqueness and whatnot, for the love of God, converts, and I use the term convert because I don't like the term revert, and that's just a personal choice of mine. I can respect and appreciate those of you who prefer the term revert. I don't like it. I'm just telling you how I feel about it. I think it's a passive term that indicates somebody going back to some state without being aware of what state that they're going into. Whereas converts is an active term. You thought about things and you basically accepted your fitrah and you actively became a Muslim. That's where I stand on that position. But once you convert, if you're a Jennifer, stay as a Jennifer. You do not need to become a Fatima. If you're a Chris, remain a Chris. You don't have to become Saleh. It's like the way that I look at these things is same thing with regards to uniformity and whatnot. The way that you dress. Imagine for a second that I come to you and I say to you, for you to become a proper Muslim, and let's say that you are in a Western context, and I say to you, for you to become a properly dressed Muslim, you need to look like Malaysians. Most people, when I give that example, they laugh. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, of course. Well, that's unfortunately the way that people are looking at cultural expression of Islam in different cultures. They think that that is Islam, as opposed to the cultural expression of that culture and just Islamic guidelines playing the role in modifying certain things so that instead of something being revealing, now it's covering, but it's still maintaining the cultural expression of that place. Meanwhile, in the West here, you have people all of a sudden dressing as if they came out of Malaysia or came out of Morocco, and you ask the guy and you find out that he's not from that area. This is not his culture, but he was made to believe that this is how he needs to look. And you do not need to look like that. Islamic guidelines on dress are guidelines. They're principles. They're not prescriptions of what you should be wearing. They're prescriptions of how you should look and conduct yourself in an honorable way. A healthy group members will have happiness and fulfillment. Genuine happiness and fulfillment that's internally generated. In other words, when they are left to their own devices as individuals, they will be still in a state of fulfillment and happiness. A harmful style group, a cult style group, they will actually have an artificial high. That high comes about from sitting in gatherings with the shaykh and reciting nasheeds and going to whatever settings and sitting down and just watching the shaykh doing dhikr and having extended sessions of dhikr. And when they leave, they have that high for that moment. But I guarantee you, 6 hours later, it's like a drug. You know when they give you a prescription for something and they say like every 8 hours, take 2 pills? That's like that. That is not genuine religiosity. That is just an artificial high. You were living vicariously through the shaykh or whatever setting that you were in, and it's the setting that made you feel that way. You're not generating it from within. And that tells me personally that the group that you're a part of and whatever it is that you're learning from them, that's not creating an internal change within you. And the longer you stay in that group and the more you feel like I have to be there, I have to, absolutely, that should tell you something about what you're getting from that place. Especially if we were to sit down and I were to assess, well, how much Quran have you memorized so far? And if not, then how much have you studied? What have you learned? And if I see that nothing, and the primary purpose of this group is to create this environment for you, that's now a drug. I mean, they say that rich people turn to drugs, poor people turn to religion. There's a truth to that statement. Unity versus uniformity. A healthy group will seek unity, whereas a harmful cult-style group wants uniformity. And we're talking here also about opinion. You know, a unity doesn't, it means that no matter what, we might disagree on certain things, but we'll still be together. I still love you as a brother, as a sister. We're together in this. We might disagree. We can disagree vehemently on some subjects, but regardless of that, I still look at you as a brother and as a sister, and we're still in this together. And I will be the first one, if I can, in any need that you might have. I'll be there. That's unity. Uniformity is, if you don't say as I say and believe as I believe, then we can't really roll together. This is not going to work out. Then you know you're in a cult. In a healthy group, truth leads to experience. Whereas in a harmful group, a cult-style group, experience becomes truth. I get this question sometimes, not to call Christianity a cult, and I don't mean that to be offensive to Christians who might be listening to this, but in Islam, the way that you arrive at truth in Islam is through rational means. The only religion that gives you a rational case for God as he should be conceived of is Islam. Everything else, they always resort, eventually when you push them on it, they say it's a mystery. We don't know. Trinity, I don't know. You know what? It's a complicated thing. We can come up with all kinds of explanations, but the fact is, nobody understands it. Not to mention that if you go into the history of Christianity and find out that this thing was also concocted, after Jesus Christ departed, and that's another subject matter that you can research on your own. But if you want to just look at the truth of the matter, it's the truth of this religion that you examine rationally. And then based on that truth, as Imam al-Ghazali said, based on the truth of the Quran and the Sunnah, now I have to practice these things, and that truth becomes my experience. Then I experience openings that I never knew they were there before. Whereas in a harmful cult-style group, it's the experience that becomes the truth for me. I go and I go into the setting where there are nasheeds, and there are some profound things being said. Some of them are over my head, I don't know, but they're profound. People are crying, maybe, even. That experience in that setting, that becomes true. That is the truth. That's not to say that you should not have a beautiful setting and a place where people will gather and have. You need to set up. ومن يعظم شعائر الله فإنها من تقوى القلوب. That فذلك من تقوى القلوب. That whoever exalts the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that إنها من تقوى القلوب is like this is from the conscious presence, awareness, taqwa of the heart. So yeah, when you build a masjid, for example, or when you build a center or a place of gathering, I mean, I really love the way that Al Mizan Avenue has their setup in Sydney. It's a beautiful setting. It puts you kind of in a mood, but that is not what gives you truth. Truth is what gets taught, and that leads you to experience, as opposed to the experience becoming the truth that you have. So if you go to a place like in Mizan Avenue, and that is the only place where you feel, that's the only time where you feel truth, and whatever gets taught there does not translate outside in your life, and where you can take that experience and regenerate your experience internally because of the truth you've been taught, and you're demanded with all the things that have been given before above that I've listed, and all that fits in, then you have to question what that center is doing. What are they about? Are they really about teaching, or are they about just creating an ambience? By the way, they're not. I know the guys. Shout out to Al Mizan Avenue. I'm doing a lot of shout outs in this episode. Just a couple more things. Accountability of leadership. In a healthy religious spiritual group, there is accountability of leadership. You will be able to, as a student, I remember I went to in a healthy setting, I've done this before, and I've experienced both sides. Because in a harmful setting, the leadership, there's no accountability. What's happening with the money? What's happening with the program? Why are we doing this? What's the purpose of doing that? This program is not a good program. Can we add this? Can we add that? Are you doing your job? Taking people to task, basically, in a respectful way, just to make sure that everything is on the up and up. In a healthy setting, people will welcome that. They'll say, of course, come on down, take a look. We're an open book. That's why I recommend for any Islamic organization now, I'm going to tell people, I think, especially if you're a not-for-profit and you're getting donations from people, you have to have a public record of all of the transactions and everything that takes place, so that everybody, whenever they want to, on your website, whenever they want to, they can go, open it up, and see where the money is going, who's doing what. There has to be accountability. Questions are encouraged in a healthy setting, and questions are discouraged in a harmful setting. And don't be confused by sometimes some questions are accepted, but other questions are not. You should be able to, in a healthy setting, ask anything. I mean, if you had a man come to the Prophet ﷺ and straight up to his face say, "Can you make fornication permissible for me?" That is as healthy of a setting as you can get. He ﷺ had such a relationship with people. That's how open it was. They can ask him anything. Nobody felt shy about anything with the Prophet ﷺ. So that's kind of what you're looking for in a healthy setting. Harmful setting, there will be some questions that are red lines. Don't ask this. Don't bring this up. Honesty prevails in a healthy setting, whereas the end justifies the means in a harmful setting. And in a healthy setting, they do not hide behind fronts. And in a harmful setting, they hide behind fronts, appearances. Let's all dress in this particular way and have this, conduct ourselves in this way and say all of the right things and the rhetoric and give ourselves the appearance of being righteous, just to hide the toxic environment that we've already established and the toxic dynamic that we have. That's a harmful setting. This is just the table that they have in this paper, and like I said, you can look at the PDF of this at andalusonline.org. These are just some things that I wanted to share with you from these papers. That I chose these papers out of a bunch for the sake of just sharing them. I know that not everybody has time to go through and do this. Hopefully this enlightens you in some way about what's going on. As a final thing, I just want to mention a couple of things with regards to how being with a shaykh is like. When I first met my teacher, Ustad Adil, the first time I met him downtown Victoria. And I looked for him for a good 10 minutes. I looked around, and when I was looking for somebody that stands out. And by a hunch, I was like, so I did, and when I picked them out finally, it was just by accident, like, okay, maybe it's this guy. And I was shocked, to be honest, because there was nothing about, he was so unassuming. He's still so unassuming. You see him, you'd never guess, like, what? This guy is a learned individual who studied with Murabit al-Hajj and Sayyidi Muhammad Haddameen, and you would never know it if you see him. Other shuyukh as well that I've met, same thing. You see them, you wouldn't guess it. You're like, what? He sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, the messenger, the beloved sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. People would come looking for him. They would go into his gathering and they wouldn't be able to tell him apart from the companions. He didn't look like, he didn't seek to be different and identifiably unique, like, hey, look at me. Like this business of charismatic leader with a narcissistic personality disorder, this was so far away. And this is why, by the way, as a side note, for those of you who study psychology and psychology of religion and end up losing your faith because of it, because you think you found some characteristic qualities you think apply to prophets, you need to study the seerah, because he sallallahu alaihi wasallam's description and what is reported about him refutes everything that evolutionary psychologists will say about prophets and the pathologies that they claim that they had. So he sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not looking for attention in that way. He was not narcissistic about it. People had to look and figure out like which one is the messenger, and the companions picked that after him. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he's gone into Jerusalem, the holders of the keys to the gates of Jerusalem, they thought his servant who was riding his mule was the Khalifa. Turns out it was Umar al-Khattab walking beside him because it was his turn to walk, and the way he dressed, it didn't give any indication that this guy was the ruler of the Muslim world. So the way that you going around the shaykh, and the way, and even he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a woman, a man comes up with such trepidation and shaking, and it's like, oh my God, this is the messenger of Allah. And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Hawwin ala nafsik, take it easy. I'm a son of a woman who used to eat this food. It's qadid. It's like bread with meat. I'm a woman who used to eat that in the market. Like, what are you doing to yourself? Relax." But the way that people conduct themselves around shuyukh, this is the shaykh, and even to the point where you didn't even mention the shaykh's name. It's the shaykh, the shaykh, the shaykh. It's like to give this aura of exaltation and adoration and just promote or whatever. So that's one thing. And the other thing is just in your interactions with the shuyukh as well. There is adab, which is decorum. You recognize the status of the person. This is a person who's carrying he's warathatul anbiya. He's carrying the inheritance of the prophets. So you treat with adab, of course. But there is adab, and there is just, you've gone overboard. You've just taken it to another level where you've exalted this person beyond their proper status as a human being. You've elevated them too much. There is respect and there is elevation that is unhealthy. I've been in gatherings where some people, it's like, oh, has the shaykh used this? Let me just rub it. Let me sit on the chair where the shaykh was sitting. Let me, oh my God, even if it's like somebody who happens to be from the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, attributed to him, yeah, then it goes even overboard. Oh, let me try. Oh, he drank from this cup. Let's all drink from the cup of water that they drank from to get the barakah. Or let's sit on the chair that they were sitting on to get the barakah, to get the blessing. All this is unhealthy type of spirituality. Or to just, you go and watch whoever the shaykh is engage in their dhikr or whatever, and most of your activity, you know what? Nasheeds, mawlids, things like that, that should be garnish. That should be the thing you have at the end of, we've studied something. We've learned something that is related to aqeedah, to fiqh, to hadith. We've studied something tangible that impacts our practical lives, so that we can live as Muslims and practice as Muslims properly with knowledge. Once we've done that, now bring on the nasheed. Let's have like an hour of nasheed and it's good. Garnish. Tasawwuf now, in the West at least, it's not garnish. Nasheeds and mawlids, that is tasawwuf now. People are seeking their sustenance from these activities, as if they're going to give you satiation, and you will not be satiated. And the way that you will know that you're not satiated, in times of great difficulty, in times of calamity, If you have not been engaged in proper practice the whole time, you will find yourself collapsing under pressure. In times of sinful behavior that could be, presenting itself in front of you, if you're not always in the remembrance of Allah in practice properly with knowledge, and you've been studying and occupying your time with study of the Quran, of the Hadith, of the Sunnah, of all of these things, if you're not occupying yourself with that, then you're going to fail the test. And moreover, any type of spirituality in Islam, any type of group that forces you, that gives you the impression that it's okay for you to abandon your worldly obligations, that it's okay for you to leave your family behind, or to leave your work, or to leave your study, and the things that you're meant to do. Anybody that tells you that that's okay, that person is misguiding you. This religion was not meant to be a hermetic Christian monastery type of religion. Most of our great scholars, if you look into their biographies, they mastered multiple disciplines. We are in need right now, as a Muslim community, of students. And by the way, you don't need to travel anywhere anymore. There are enough shuyukh all over the place. The States, Canada, Australia, the UK, everywhere you have shuyukh present. All you have to do is just look and get out of this high horse if I need to go study in this particular country because it's exotic, or be connected with the shaykh because he's well known. You need to find somebody who's a scholar, who's trained, and ask for specific things to study. I want to study this text. Can you teach it to me? When can I come? What day of the week can I sit with you and study this? That's what you need to do. The rest of the time, spend it in your universities mastering a subject that unfortunately has been divorced from its transcendent essence, divorced from the sacred. Because now we have to do the hard work of manually combining the two. Because it's been divorced for us for the last couple of 100 years. Ever since the colonialist project went through the Muslim world and separated the madrasas and made the religious education separate, we've been struggling ever since. And that's where people are having their doubts and their issues. So now we have the hard work. The task is upon us now, this generation, to study. Go get your masters and go get your degrees, and people who study to the highest level so that we can theorize properly, and at the same time be connected with scholars and study yourself. You can't just say I'm going to connect a group of secularly educated Muslims with scholars of Islam and then they will synthesize something. No. You should become, and I don't buy this business of there's too much knowledge now, I can't become a master. No, you can. Don't buy that lie. You can become a master of medicine and also a master of Islamic theology and also a PhD in cancer research, and you can do all of these things. I don't buy this business if you can't because you don't have time and the knowledge is too much. There's always a way. People can find a way if you really have the himmah to do it. Don't let people talk you down and make you think that you can't achieve these things. Anyways, before I get too fired up. Alhamdulillah. I think that's it for now. I do plan to record a couple more episodes over the next couple of weeks. I think I should have the time because I have a couple of weeks without any exams or any major things coming up. So inshallah, next week I'll come up with the next episode after this. But if not, it'll be a week after. Once again, another plug for Andalus Book Club. If you miss my sultry voice, you can go and subscribe and then listen to it and watch me actually in the webinars, because all the recordings are video recordings that I put up there. Otherwise, you can also support this work through Patreon. I'd really appreciate it. For as little as $1, if you go to patreon.com/ the link is in the description, /Muhammad Gilan, you'll find the link for my page there, and you can support this podcast, basically help me pay all the fees for it. Other than that, I appreciate you indulging me for this time being, and I'll see you guys next time, inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.